This is Dev Talk. I'm Jonathan Hopp, and I'm joined by Brian Leithead. How you doing, Brian?
Not too bad, John. Thanks for having me on. It's gonna be a great episode.
So, I like talking to devs, people who made the transition from being something else into being a developer. And you actually are a recent bootcamp graduate, right? So, you actually took my bootcamp not too long ago, and now you're actually a dev.
Yeah, so I took the fall 22 full stack JavaScript course, which I then completed in April. And I was immediately offered a web position or web developer position with my current job. I kind of was fortunate in that regard. But yeah, very recent graduate within the last 3 months.
Why don't you just a little bit about yourself? Like, what did you do before, like, development? That's
Kind of
fine.
fresh, yeah, fresh out of college. College, I really didn't even complete college, but it wasn't for me. I started working in a comic book shop.
Cool.
Yeah, and it really taught me kind of hello nerd. Who wouldn't want to be a nerd working in a comic book shop? But it actually taught me a lot of business aspects. Of finding value in anything. And it was very weird kind of experience to be able to say that now. At the time, it just feels like I was just like doing weekly comic book polls and eBay sales, but there's a lot of data analysis to it, which
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So it kind of started there. I worked there until the pandemic happened, and unfortunately we were kind of forced to close. Just with all of that. And then I actually ended up taking a job with a local mortgage company, one of the big ones, and it really pressed upon me that I love doing acts of service.
Okay.
It was a customer service role, but I loved talking to people, but then it kind of started wearing on me a bit, having that much interactions with people. I mean, I do love talking to people, but when it's just that high of a volume, I mean, I'm a extroverted introvert, so I kind of have like that social battery.
Okay.
And I was trying to get transition to a different role. Well, long story short, and I'm kind of getting away from the point here a bit, but I then transitioned into more of an analysis role with another broker company.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So I was doing like closing documents. I was doing a little bit of jack of all trades. And then unfortunately I just got laid off from that company. Just with everything that was happening within the mortgage industry, higher interest rates, lower demand for refinances, which is a majority of business for brokers and mortgages in general.
I have something similar too.
Yeah, yeah. So I ended up actually finding a job within 9 days, which if there's anything I'm persistent, especially when it comes to finding a career. And I was offered a position at a wholesaling company for police equipment, doing for a sub company that does retail, so like a retail e-commerce. So kind of looping that back into my experience of working at the comic book shop.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really all about kind of how you market yourself. I'm doing data cleaning and stuff like that, but to how I got into actual tech was I saw an advertisement for not specifically your boot camp, but the one that we mutually were a part of, and I wanted to do something that was very challenging and something that I had never done before. I feel like I never truly applied like my full brain muscle, and it just really drew me to be able to write code and be passionate about something, because I never really had done that before. I was never really passionate about my career. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. So to kind of answer your question in the long term, why I drew to coding, it was difficult, and I wanted to challenge myself.
Okay, that's really interesting. So let's kind of like peel the onion back a little bit then. So, you basically, I think what I'm hearing is that you were doing jobs, right? And you have a family, and you gotta make ends meet. You gotta do what you gotta do. But it sounds like a lot of these positions weren't really intellectually challenging, or they didn't give you that sense of like I've climbed a mountain, I've really accomplished something. They more felt like going through the motions, and you go day after day, and you do what you're supposed to do, but afterwards you don't feel like you've really accomplished something great.
Yeah.
Is that a good summation?
Yeah, my wife says that I want the instant gratification when I take these jobs, but it's just that's true. I just want gratification in the work, and I just wasn't. You're right. I was not living up to that in my previous jobs, but I feel like I'm living up to that now in my current role.
Okay, because it feels like it's a lot more difficult. Um, let's talk about the boot camp itself and like how you get started. Because I always ask this for people who've been through boot camps. If you had to do it all over again, let's say we like as you are now. I hit the rewind button, right? You're talking to Brian from 6, 7, 8 months ago. What do you tell him to do differently?
Do more coding exercises and research before the boot camp starts. I thought like once I did my pre-work and got accepted to the actual program, I was just going to get it naturally. Ooh, boy, was I wrong. Not even close. I was like, wait, what's a P tag again? What? It's like, if I had to do it over again, which I wouldn't, I would have taken like some sort of, just put more emphasis up front on actually knowing what I was doing. So it didn't come as a shock, or I didn't struggle through it like I did.
You felt you struggled?
Yeah, I felt the entire time just with the pace of everything. I didn't have the time to retain it, and I would even spend my off time, like my weekends and my time that we weren't in class, reviewing everything, coding exercises, talking to my friends in the industry. It just wasn't sticking to me at first. And it's like, yeah, we're going to learn 4 different coding languages. We're going to get a couple weeks, like Isaac was saying last week. It just didn't stick with me until really we got into like React. I don't know. It was just for some reason, just with React, it just clicked. I don't know what it was.
Sometimes your brain needs time to process information, to make connections, and to like form new bodies of knowledge. So I always find that like teaching the language aspect, that's kind of like that's interesting because normally with my experience, students are backwards. Like when I teach frameworks like React or Angular, that's the part that like people have deer in the headlights. They're like basically you're given a car, right? Like React is like a car. Like it's not just like here's a couple like things. Like no, here's a fully functioning front end framework that's supposed to do whatever you want it to do. And most people are intimidated. And also we don't usually have a lot of time to go over it. Whereas like the language itself, like JavaScript, I'm just teaching like one off. Like here's a technique to do this. Here's a technique to do that. But for you, it seemed like having the framework was maybe like easier for you to like get your arms around.
Yeah, I think it was just the structure of React, because it's like with JavaScript, you have to target certain things in your HTML with like event listeners, things like that. With React, because it's kind of backwards, right? Like you're building these components and you're building the JavaScript to run into the virtual DOM, it just made more sense to me. So it's like just flipped it on its head, and just maybe the component structure of React. I don't know. Maybe that's what really stuck with me.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, basically, your bootcamp experience sounds like it was fairly intense. Like you were spending a lot of your extra free time just reviewing things and studying.
Just to be able to, I guess, keep my head above water. I was spending maybe 4 or 5 hours on the weekend, and then a couple hours during the week studying, just to make sure that I had that neuroplasticity that Andrew Huberman talks about, right? Just so it actually sticks in your brain, like, because it's like, here's you with the plunger, and like, here's, like you trying to put the information into our heads. Well, it's like, well, I got to have another plunger in this head, just going like back into it, so it sticks. Everyone's learning different, or learning ability is different. I found success in what helped me make it through the boot camp, but it did take away time from my family, and I don't have any regrets. I completed the boot camp, like that felt great, even though I have the the certificate. But it took a lot of hard work. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the main theme. I mean, anything worth doing is going to be hard, honestly. So that's going to be the theme going forward. But okay, so basically it just sounds like what you wanted just more time to be more organized the way you were studying is what it sounds like for the boot camp. Like you may have done the pre-work and maybe like, oh yeah, this pre-work was pretty easy. Like cool, I think I've got this. And then when we started doing work, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, and it's like, even then, when I was actually at work, I'd be listening to a Udemy course, a YouTube tutorial on something, and so I've spent more time, and I hope my employer's not listening, of trying to become complete this boot camp, but, my work didn't suffer, but I just felt, it was really fast-paced, a lot of information to process, and I'm still processing a lot of the information even now, but it was a lot of time put into this for sure.
Definitely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit because I'm curious about because a lot of people as I've taught, but I'm on my sixth boot camp right now. I feel that there's always a bit of melancholy for me because essentially we get through these 6 months. We're in the trenches. I'm teaching all this stuff. You graduate, I shake your hand, I give you a certificate, and I say, okay, good luck, buddy, right? You got to go out into the job market. And, the job market, it's not like the early 2000s anymore, right? It's not 2002, it's not 2010, it's 2023, interest rates are up, tens of thousands of people got laid off from Google and from Amazon, from all these other companies, and they're in the pool with you, right? Junior developer dude with bootcamp certificate. And I always feel a little bit, I try to be be positive about it, but it's rough competition, and the certificate is a way for them to start talking with you, but it's no guarantee of a job. So I wanted to kind of ask you, it seems like you converted inside your company, which is actually really good, because that way you already have a relationship with them. How did that work out?
I still kind of had an interview with my boss, in a sense. I graduated the boot camp right after my birthday. It was actually a week after, so it was the best birthday present that I could ever give myself. Doesn't matter what bottle of bourbon or crazy nerd thing that I could buy myself. It was the best thing I could give myself. But I think that my boss was afraid that I was going to leave the company, so we kind of had this real chat. But we kind of sat down and chatted, and he's like, I don't want to lose you as employees. Kind of what is it going to take? And I was like, well, I don't want to leave. I don't want to go into this job market looking for a job. I have the skills, and we have a website that needs to be worked on. And you want to save money on this website, you need to be able to show our investors. We didn't spend a large, unquantifiable amount of money on a website. So, and he agreed. In this market, unfortunately, you kind of have to have some luck on your side. And I had that with this company. So if I had to offer any piece of advice to my fellow junior devs, you have the certificate, and kind of with that, there kind of comes a sense of entitlement, I feel. And this isn't a criticism. You worked hard for 6+ months or whatever the case is to get this certificate done, but you got to market yourself somehow. You have a certificate, an employer's not going to care. You have to be able to show that you can do the work, that you're willing to learn. And I just feel that a large majority of junior devs don't do that. They don't know how to,
It's a different ball game than what you've been doing previously, how to make yourself stand out. And again, one of the minds is that you're swimming in the same pool with the thousands of developers who are working for Facebook, and a lot of them are better than I am. So companies are snatching them up left and right. You know what I'm saying? So what seats are there left for junior devs or people where they may say, okay, we'll take a chance on this person?
Right. And I agree 100%. And I know a lot of these folks who have been laid off from Google are starting with these startups, getting their round A and B funding, snatching up junior devs that way. But you got to kind of be in the right area. You got to network, and again, unfortunately, you have to have some luck on your side that somebody's going to take a chance on you. And a lot of these companies, even for a junior developer position, are asking for 10 years of React history.
Or something ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, great, do you want me to be the guy who actually invented React? Because React was, 2011 or something like that? So it's
Yeah,
like you want me to be on the ground? Yeah, exactly. You want me to be Mark Zuckerberg?
Well, I think in your case, you had a couple things, good things going for you. So number one, it sounded like your boss was forward thinking, right? So he sounds like a good business person. So he looked at you and said basically like, okay, Brian's got a certificate. In his head, right, you're going to take that and go cash it in or go somewhere else where it's more of a development position. So he actually sat you down and did his due diligence as a leader, and basically said, listen, put on the table, what can we do to keep you? So how do you find your duties now? Do you like working on the website and doing those sorts of things, or like what's your day like nowadays?
Yeah, great question. It's mostly, our website hasn't launched. Unfortunately, it won't launch for another 6 to 8 months. But my daily is just kind of whatever the back end is serving up as like new pages or anything like that. It's for me to kind of style them and make sure that they're functional. So very front end focused, right? So a lot of HTML building, styling it with CSS, make sure it's functional with JavaScript. I obviously took your boot camp for full stack, but right now just from a day-to-day operation, it's just strictly front end and testing.
Oh, okay. So like a lot of manual testing, or do you have like a testing framework like Cypress or something like that?
So we're using BigCommerce, which is an e-commerce company. They actually have all this functionality kind of built in. So I'm kind of lucky that way that I actually have some structure, and the technology is a little bit easier to use. And obviously I understand HTML and CSS. So I would like us to move more towards React, but I don't have control over that. So.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, you're working on a real life project. That's the main thing to be doing right now. Is something real. Like, not the boot camp is great. Like, we gave you guys like projects to work on, but they're not realistic. They're just like more simplified versions of more complicated things. So like getting that, like, how do you feel about getting this? Like how do you feel that like the working with an actual real project in the real world differs from like what you may have imagined being in the boot camp?
I'm lucky in that first off, it's very gratifying to actually be able to do this real world project. To answer your question, I'm also very lucky that the quality of the boot camp projects that we did. I mean, it wasn't trying to get Hello World to a page, right? It was actually like a lot of functionality to it. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of differences, and I have to read a lot of documentation before I can really get into the coding side of the part, right? I mean, one of the program managers joked that I think it's like 50% meetings, 25% planning, and then 25% actual coding.
Right.
That's actually what my day looks like, right? Like, and maybe a little small percentage of cussing at a computer in my head. Why isn't this running? But to answer your question, I do a lot of testing, and I'm lucky that I'm still retaining that information from the boot camp and applied it to this. So, and the software that I use, wonderful. Could not have asked for an easier transition.
The commerce software you're using.
Correct. Yeah.
Those things have a lot, because they've been around for a while. They've added a lot of things over the years and fixed bugs, and it's sort of like they're very, very geared towards doing the one thing that they do and doing it really well. So another thing I wanted to ask was about like mentality shift, right? Like, so it's very difficult to see the change in yourself over a long period of time, because you're always you, right? You're always wherever you're at. What would you say is like the biggest mentality? Like, picture Brian like day before the boot camp versus Brian now. What's like your biggest mentality shift? Way in which you think differently.
We have a clip for this. I'm just kidding. We don't have a clip for that. I'm much more analytical about things than I was before. I look at things differently. Like, I look at my 2-year-old. I live life like a 2-year-old. I'm still learning something new every day. I mean, my son just said hop hop when when you ask him what a kangaroo says, right? So my hop hop is writing cleaner code, but also I'm cooking for myself now more than I have, because I have to, just to save money, I'm doing these meal preps every week. I didn't do that before. I'm back to writing comedy. I kind of actually glossed over that. I used to do stand-up comedy a lot, and I was an open micer. I'm back to doing that. I'm just learning to code changed my life, and for the better. I now have self-worth. I'm more of an advocate for myself than I ever was, and it just kind of like rewired my brain that I kind of needed it to be. I'm losing weight. I'm doing all these sorts of things, but I don't think I would have been able to do that without coding, right? Like, I'm researching things more. It's just, it opened, like I said at the beginning, it opened up my brain 1,000%. It's like limitless, you know?
Let's delve into that a little bit more, because that's really interesting, because it seems like it had a lot of side effects, right? Like, you do comedy, which, by the way, like, kudos to you. I could never get up in front of a bunch of people and tell jokes.
And, and we want to talk about doing something hard and that you have to do consistently. That is also 100% true with comedy. You can't just like be the funny guy at work and expect to crush. Like, you have to work at it, just like coding. So.
And the interesting thing is, though, is saying you're basically, what I'm hearing is you had like a lot of just overall behavior changes, and things had nothing to do with coding, right? It's like probably like meal prep, for example. You're thinking about your budget more, and you're analyzing it and seeing like what goals do you have for your budget and how you're going to get there. You're having a little more confidence. You're advocating for yourself, and I think that is expressing itself in, like, for example, comedy, doing stand up more regularly, all right, and trying to improve at that, like looking at your kid and seeing his development, and being more analytical about that. So it seems that there was a more of a fundamental mental shift, and I think that from there everything else emerged. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to do with a boot camp. I mean, if you're somebody who can or teach themselves like you, coding, or if you have to go to a university, do it. I mean, and if you're able to, because for me, it changed everything. I mean, my mood is improved. I'm ultimately constantly. But again, these aren't necessarily linked to boot camp. It's just taking what you've learned and just improving upon it.
Okay, so I guess you develop an attitude of improvement, like what is it? Not habitual improvement, like incrementalism, like basically the idea that like you're not going to eat the whole elephant, but we're going to like bit by bit every day I can get a little bit better at X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and especially during coding, at the beginning, to kind of circle back to your question of the from previous of what's the difference between Brian now and Brian then, is I wasn't doing things in steps. I thought that I had to be naturally good at something to do it, and I wasn't giving myself that grace of taking the time and the steps just to get better step by step. Because when I played sports and I did things in high school, things just kind of came natural to me, and when it didn't, I would get really down on myself. But now I don't. From the movie Fight Club, it's you lose everything, now you're free to kind of do everything. It's kind of paraphrasing what he said, and not necessarily in the context that he meant it, but I didn't lose everything, but I kind of gave myself the grace to get that incremental mentality.
So you said something really important here. I want to like talk more about it. So this idea of like natural talent, right? This idea that like some people are naturally good at certain things and other people are not, and then there's like this parentheses afterwards. So therefore, if you're not naturally talented at it, you shouldn't try, right? Like I have boot camp students that are just sort of like they get to like the middle of the boot camp, and they're like, man, I don't have any talent for this. Like I'm not talented at this. I don't have any, the coding gift, the coding gene, the coding blessing, or whatever they imagine it to be, and therefore there's no point in me doing it. I want to quit the boot camp. I always have to have a conversation with these people, basically saying that that's not the way that this works. That some people may have the coding spirit or whatever way you want to call it, but those people are like very small amount, and if that were the case, then no one would code. And then most of the coding is just basically training you to think, like how to think about things, which you can do. Like it's just like it's like any other thing that you can like learn by repetition and proper practice. You can learn how to do it. So it sounds like you had that sort of mindset a little bit.
Yeah, I had the mindset at the beginning that I had to naturally be good at this to do it, and I came to a very real correlation early that I'm not going to be naturally good at this. And I struggled for the first half of the boot camp. I mean, I thought about quitting. I mean, I was lucky that I had friends within the boot camp using your resources of talking me out of it. You've spent all this money, you're not going to get it back. Why quit now? And maybe that's where the flip happened. I don't know. During this whole process, I just rewired my brain. It just happened. I don't know.
It happens subtly. It's not like someone walks up and shakes your hand and says, "Okay, cool." Like you think differently now. Like that doesn't actually happen. It's also something you got support from the other bootcamp students. How was that? What was that like?
I've used this analogy with like explaining it to what a boot camp is like to people who aren't obviously going to coding or anything like that, but it's almost like going to war. It's like a lot of stuff's being thrown at you at a fast pace, and you kind of have to, it's like storming the beaches at Normandy. You just got to get to the beach, right?
Right.
They're kind of like your brothers and sisters in arms, in a sense. It's a very stressful situation, but to kind of keep yourself going, you need that. You need a support system. My wife was very supportive. She had to essentially raise our son for 6 months without me, and that weighed heavily on me. But she was very supportive, and to also have somebody who knows what I'm going through, and these folks with my fellow students at the boot camp. They knew it. They knew the struggle. They knew what it takes. So to have that support system from them is very important, I think, to get through this boot camp. I don't think I would have made it without them.
One last question, and this is something I always the last question I would like to ask junior developers, people who've gone through it, people who've like made the transition, because right now it sounds like you're successful, like you're in your job, you're doing development type work. We don't know what will happen in the future, right? But like you're on the path, right? Like my advice to all my bootcamp graduates is find the job, stay there at least a year, right? Because you got to have that like hands-on, warts and all. This is the way the real system works. If someone's thinking about transition to tech now, whether or not they take a boot camp, whether they go to university, whether they self-study, however they want to go do that, what would your advice be to them?
Know how you learn. Be very firm of that. Make sure that you have the actual passion to be able to complete it. Obviously, time management is very important too. If you're not happy in your job, the software community is one of the most supportive groups I've ever been a part of. It's weird because it's like, well, in my last industry, it was almost like you had to have a whole index inside your brain to be able to function. But if you have a service to other mentality, I think that coding is for you. You may not even see the person that you're coding this application for, but at the end of the day, you're trying to improve somebody's life. Whether it's Instagram updates or even making a to-do checklist, you're improving somebody's life with this, and I think that's very rewarding. That's what the gratification we talked about earlier comes to play for me. So I think anyone can do it if you just have the tenacity to do it and just sit down and learn and code every day.
Okay, so it seems like there has to be a reason for it, though. There has to be like some sort of underlying passion. Or so let's talk about more of this service. So that for you, that's what drives you, I guess, is the idea that you're doing something that benefits someone else.
Yeah, in my particular instance, it's helping my salesperson be able to send out invoices to people he's selling product to. I mean, that's maybe a little more literal term, but knowing that I'm able to do that is very rewarding. It might be, the motivation might be different for everybody, whether it's career changing or not. That was one motivation, but you just kind of have to know yourself. I mean, I'm 34 and have been 3 years of therapy. It's taken me a long time to know what I want, and this is a career that I wanted, and I know I want.
You were able to pretty much follow up on it. All right. So essentially, what I'm hearing is that you really just gotta know what you want to do, right? If you decide that you really want to do this, then that'll carry you through. That seems to be the message I'm hearing.
And the motivation might be different for everybody. It's, I have a family. Maybe you just are tired of getting chewed out by your boss or direct team lead. Who knows? Or tired of serving at a restaurant. Whatever the case is. You just have to know what you want out of it, and what you put into it, you're going to get back.
Yeah, for me, it was wanting to be paid on time and have health insurance. For example. Mine was more bread and butter.
Yeah, 100%. And if it was just me, I could maybe health benefits wouldn't have been a thing. But it's like I got a family. Like that's also important too. I can't just be working mom pop shop. No offense to any of them, but I can't just not have dental insurance. Like I need to have my teeth cleaned. It's just a fact. So, but yeah, that's good reasoning.
All right, awesome, Brian. Thank you so much for this interview. So, it really has some good insights. I hope whoever's listening to this, another junior developer, or maybe someone who's thinking about making the transition, some of this advice can help them be clear on do they want to do it? If they do it, they're in it for the long haul. So it just sounds like I think the main thrust, the banner, the advertisement that comes out of this is essentially know that this is what you want to do, and that will carry you through.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And thank you for having me on, John. This episode is brought to you by Sprite. Just use the code HOP. And please don't forget to rate, and subscribe.
See, that's called manifesting, right? We're manifesting right now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for having me.